Midweek as the Buffs prepare for Wyoming, and Adam, we were able to talk to tight ends coach Brett Bartoloni, as well as tight end Zach Atkins and defensive end Alex McPherson. So, a good group today. But before we get to that, I guess we ought to start at the report from CBS that says that it looks like the Buffs are going to go with Kaidon Salter at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, that makes the most sense, as we talked about on our video yesterday. We know that Coach Prime isn't going to announce anything publicly, so it's going to be kind of like it was last week going into the Houston game, a report by ESPN out there. And I don't think Coach Prime is going to be too happy about that, but it's hard when you got that many people working in a program to keep a lid on something. If somebody is practicing during the week with the first team offense, a lot of times it's going to leak out.
Yeah, I asked Brett Bartoloni, I'm like, have you seen any? I was asking, like, how have the quarterbacks handled all this, and especially Kaidon, having the job, losing it. And he actually said Kaidon came out of practice this week and was more vocal and just seemed to be taking on that leadership role, which that's the thing that Coach Prime said that he needed to see from Kaidon Salter, leadership and consistency. I'm guessing he probably leaned a little bit more to the leadership part of it, but it sounds like Kaidon is taking on more of a vocal role.
And it's not just that position. They need leadership at a lot of spots to step up, and you hope Tawfiq Byard could parlay last week's performance into being able to be a guy that can step up and be a leader. They're still looking for that at a lot of positions. Yeah. That was one of the things we heard with Kaidon Salter at Liberty, is that he was a dynamic playmaker. Leadership wasn't one of the first things mentioned there, so was something that I think he needs to improve on, as we've heard Coach Prime talk about. And they need him to. They need somebody at that position to really take ownership of this offense. And Ryan Saab was a nice story, but as we've talked about the last 3 weeks, this team has its best potential with Kaidon Salter realizing his potential behind center. And not to nitpick and go back, but like, that's where you look at the Houston game and go, okay, well, the defense played pretty poorly. They probably weren't going to win that football game, even if Kaidon Salter started that game. But you would have gotten more of the kinks out of Kaidon Salter playing in this offense worked out by having more reps in that game. And so that's one of the things now you're having to do that against Wyoming, and maybe it'll be a quick jump start. But you look back and go, you really wish Salter had at least some reps, maybe even half the game last week.
Well, again, I'll go back even further. I wouldn't have pulled the plug on him after 2 drives against Delaware. I thought Delaware was the perfect game. He had some jitters at Georgia Tech, the perfect game to, all right, let's settle down, get you some more reps. Delaware would have been a great game for that. I'm curious, we'll never know, but I'm curious to see what this would have looked like if you had given Kaidon more time against Delaware. He looks good, and then he starts against Houston. I wonder how this would look. We'll never know, but they're in this situation because they've done some of that rotating, and but the bottom line is, like you said, they've got to find leaders. Whether it was Kaidon or not. I mean, Kaidon, whoever has to step up as a leader. Brett Bartoloni said, "Look, we need leaders everywhere."
Yeah, and it's tough when you've got guys that, like a Draylon Miller, for instance, that was the leader of that group, but he's struggling right now. It's hard to lead when you're not playing up to your potential either, right? And so that's been the case at some certain spots. But yeah, I will say it again, though. This is a football team with enough talent that the floor should be 6 wins in a bowl game. I still stick with that. I think the talent's there. It's just got to come together.
I would say, to your point on that, with Tawfiq Byard, it's hard to be a leader when you're on the scout team, right, and injured. And so, to your point, like, maybe last week is one of those games where it's like you can see that you see leadership out of Tawfiq Byard a little bit. I mean, we saw it like at Well-Off and things like that. So I'm curious to see how that looks. This is a big game for this team, and the tight end room. Let's go to that, because Zach Atkins talked to us today. That group is kind of coming along, and Zach is developing a little bit.
Well, and Bartoloni said that he's still the number one guy there, that there are situations they can work Smalls in there, and we have seen him play a few snaps here the last couple games. But I think they they see again, going back to who's got the highest ceiling at that position. Zach Atkins, converted receiver, didn't really block a whole lot at the Division II level. It's going to take some time, but he's going to be pretty good once he gets that experience. You can tell that it's an area he takes pride in. And Bartoloni said that there were times in the Georgia Tech game that he was doing really well as a blocker, but then kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, had a rough performance out at Houston. They need more out of that position because they are playing a lot of 11 personnel looks out there now, and so they do need that position to be better.
Yeah, not as many the other night at Houston, it seemed like. I mean, when you look at the snap count on PFF, Atkins, I don't think he played as much as the previous 2 games, but they need him out there.
Yeah, and he's going to be a really good player. That it's nice that he's got another year of eligibility, because you're really investing in Zach Atkins early on this season, I feel like, and by the second half he'll be pretty good, and then he can be the leader, the guy in that room going into 2026.
Yeah. Moving on to Alex McPherson, a freshman that has really started to make a name for himself. I mean, has the block punt a couple weeks ago, made some plays last week, and he looks like a beast.
Yeah, is he listed at 6'5"?
I think so.
He's all of that.
Yeah.
They're not fudging that at all.
Yeah.
He is a couple of years in a college weight program. He's going to be an NFL-looking guy, and he's beyond what you would expect as a true freshman, and that IMG program just sets those guys up. It is basically set up like a college. They're getting up early in the day doing workouts. You've got study hall, so it's just so much easier for those guys to transition. And it's been cool to see both he and London Merritt kind of succeeding, because I think they're feeding off each other a little bit.
Yeah, both those guys arrived for practices before the Alamo Bowl. I remember Ben Finneseth pointing out Alex McPherson, say, "Whoo, that kid is showing up," and like he's inspiring a lot of the older guys, and I think he's still doing that. When Alex gets in there now, if you're an older guy on that edge, you're like, wait a minute, I need to get my spot back, and not that you'd be selfish about it, but you want to, maybe that fuels some of those older guys, and Sam Okunlola, when he gets back, like maybe he's fueled by that.
Yeah, I mean, based off what we saw last week, again, in a small sample size, even with the season, 3 games, it seems like McPherson needs to be on the field.
Yeah.
I don't know how you take him off right now until somebody proves on game day that they're better than him consistently.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit. It's a different position, but and maybe it's because they did the same thing. But Trevor Woods, his freshman year, his first big play was a block punt. Remember that?
Yeah.
And then by later in the year, you're like, that kid needs to be on the field. And that's sort of the way Alex McPherson is.
Yeah, and he's got that role on special teams as well, so a very versatile guy. But yeah, there's not a whole lot separating 1 from 5 in that group if Okunlola's healthy.
Yeah, well, they need to get him back. They need to get a few other guys back. And Adam and I will be back later on this week to preview the game against Wyoming.